Hello and welcome. We have a special event that we are partaking in, and we invite you to join us. We are having a conversation tonight with some friends from the church that we will introduce to you shortly. And it's a conversation about race, racism, racial reconciliation, a very touchy and difficult subject, but a very timely one. I know I'm looking forward to learning quite a bit, and again, invite you to join us. But before we do that, let's do a couple of introductions. My name is TJ Sarachuk. I am the lead pastor here at Rexdale Alliance Church. I asked them all to introduce themselves with their name, how long they've been at the church. I've been here about 6 months, but they've all been here longer. So let's just work our way down the line here so you can see who we are visiting with tonight.
Hi, my name is Stetson Ford. I'm an elder at Rexdale Alliance, and I have been at Rexdale for over 20 years.
Hello, my name is Rachel, and I've been at this church just less than 20 years. You mostly will probably see me in young adults.
Coleen is joining us from Zoom, so there might be a little bit of momentary delays as we pass it back and forth, but unfortunately she's in quarantine, but we believe safe and healthy, but she's joining us tonight. And Coleen, could you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Coleen Jackson, and my family and I have been coming to Rexdale for just over 4 years.
Fantastic, thank you. And Denise.
Hi, my name is Denise Stedman, and I've been attending Rexdale for over 15 years, and I've been involved in a variety of ministries, and recently was on the Deacons Board.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining. Just a couple of comments as we jump into the conversation. First, I was reminded of year and a half ago, I was able to go down to Atlanta and visit Martin Luther King Jr.'s church and the different setups there, and was reading Amos 5:24, where that he quoted in his I Have a Dream speech, "But let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-ending stream." So just to kind of frame our conversation, that passage, and then just a couple of thoughts here as you mentally engage with this conversation. We believe as Christians, we believe that every person, regardless of gender or race or whatever, every person is made in the image of God and is therefore valuable. Unfortunately, not everybody either believes that or acts as such. And that is why racism is an issue and needs to be talked about. You'll notice our panel today, if I can use that term, are all people, a Black community. I am fully aware that racism extends beyond the Black community. The genesis of this conversation was out of February's Black History Month. So our conversation, our context is limited to the Black community and racism inside and toward that community. We're fully aware that it goes beyond that, but just so you know, that's the context for our conversation tonight. And then I do want to point out a couple of things. There will be some sensitive things shared. This is going to require some vulnerability, especially on the part of our participants and our panel. So please extend grace. If things don't sit quite right with you, if something makes you uncomfortable, it is possible that it was miscommunicated. It's also possible that it has hit an area that you didn't realize maybe you actually sit in a seat of privilege. I know I have been learning a lot about this. Sometimes we get uncomfortable. I want to challenge you that sometimes discomfort isn't a bad thing. It's a learning opportunity. So if something happens and you don't like how something sits or feels, the goal tonight, no one is going to be taking shots or attacking anybody. So I invite you to sit in the seat of a learner and see if there's something where we can move the step or the conversation one step closer towards equality, towards justice, mercy, love, as God would call us to. So let's get started. I guess my first question I would be interested to hear, and maybe just to give you guys some context or a plan. Denise, we'll start with you on this one, and then we'll kind of work our way around. What were some of your hopes or goals or dreams when this first hit your inbox, this idea of a conversation in the church setting with me and all of you, what would you hope to accomplish or see progressed because of a conversation like this?
First of all, I would like to say thank you for actually hosting this conversation, because I think often if we don't realize that there is a problem, we cannot fix it. One of my goals is that people will get a better understanding of how deep racism exists, and as a result will learn and will want to actually do more research. Myself, I've been doing research as well this summer, and there's so much in the history. And when you really begin to start to understand the complexity of racism, you can have a better appreciation and understanding of what's happening in our world today.
Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, just to add to that, like, I hope that people don't take offensive, like, or listen to this and say, well, that's not me, or, you know, be closed-minded. I hope and pray that, like, people will be open-minded about it and, like, recognize, you know, that we all have biases in ourselves, and just because we're having this conversation, don't, like, tune out and be like, oh, this doesn't apply to me, because it applies to all of us. That's what I hope, and I hope that our church, this will, like, start conversation, like, this will encourage people to ask questions, be more engaged in wanting to learn more and how we can do better.
Okay. Coleen, anything to add?
Yes, I was really running the other way when I was approached to be on the panel, but this is a mission from God. That's how I look at it for us. And my goal here is to really educate people, or try to draw them closer to us through telling our story, especially as it pertains to the trauma that has been left behind from slavery. So there's a series of stories here that needs to be told, and education is really key.
All right, thank you. Stetson?
I'll just echo what Coleen was saying. This is a good opportunity to learn from your fellow congregants, just their stories, and a little closer ways to connect. I know a lot of people will say, "That's not me. I don't know anyone who's ever said something like that or ever thought something like that." But I hope that you guys can just hear stories of, oh, I know Stetson, and that's how he was affected. So let me try to figure out ways where I can learn more and try to figure out a way just to understand the situation, even though you might be so far from it that it just doesn't seem like it's ever happened.
Okay. A couple of, before we go to the next big question, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of bringing a little bit of a unique perspective to this, correct, with your parents?
Right. So my dad is I'm half white and half black. So my mom is black and my dad is white.
Have you ever, in your opinion, obviously it's somewhat subjective, but have you ever experienced where you weren't black enough for the black community, you weren't white enough for the white community?
Yes.
Huh.
So that's been my experience growing up, and even till now, I still feel like the white community will say, oh, you're not white enough, or they say, oh, you're too black. And I find the black community will say, oh, you're not black enough, you're white. So I definitely struggled with where I fit and where my identity is.
Okay, so I don't know who this question then is for, but that comment there, you're not black enough. Is that a reference to skin color and visual, or is that a culture thing, or what? If that is said, what's actually being said there?
I feel like it almost depends on the context.
Okay.
So I don't even know of an example.
Yeah, sorry, that's off script. I'm just curious and clueless.
Yeah, some Like dancing.
Okay.
Like if you're at a party and it's primarily black people, or like for Rachel's example, like if she's not dancing black enough, then she's not black enough. Or
Okay.
if she's not dancing the style of whatever genres we played. Or like the words that she uses in different conversations. Someone might say you're not black enough, or you're not white enough, or like you speak too black, or you speak too white, things like that.
Wow. Okay, another question just for my own sake, and my theory is if I'm curious, somebody else is. When we get into a conversation about race and racism, does it matter, and you're a person of color, you're black, does it matter if you're like an African American versus a first generation, we just moved here from Nigeria versus we're from the Caribbean, like, does that matter or no?
I feel like for me that doesn't really matter.
Okay.
It's because when I have experienced racism, it's basically based on the color of my skin. I haven't opened my mouth or anything. They don't know where I'm from, but already they have made this decision that this is the way that this person is because she is black.
So we've reduced to the lowest common denominator of just a color. Okay. Okay, that helps me understand. So I hesitate to ask this because I'm exposing myself to learning things I don't want to about myself, but I'm fascinated by the potential answers. What do you wish someone like me would understand about privilege that I probably don't, or at least don't fully grasp? So, and this is where this is going to make some of us uncomfortable, but I'm going to challenge you to listen. At least here in Canada, being a white male has pretty much never been a bad thing. What don't I understand? Even though I can acknowledge that that's been good, what don't I get about privilege, or at least not fully grasp, if you had to guess? Denise, why don't you start?
Sure. I would say first thing is that it exists. I think so many people, white people feel that it doesn't exist, but it does. And it's so deep. When you look at systemic racism and you look at, economics, education, housing, employment, all of these things that are impacted by a person's skin color. This was a great example, was, someone who, for example, is Caucasian, privileged, they may have hardships. So just because you're white doesn't mean that you are always going to have, a life that is easy. But your skin color does not impact the quality necessarily of your life, where it can for a person who's black. Because just the fact that our skin is black, you may not get that job. Even the name, there is proof that the name on a resume, if it is black, that person, even if they have the same credentials as someone who's white, will not necessarily get called for that interview. And again, when you look at the history of how black people have been treated, we are so far behind, and we are playing catch up big time. And that's why it's great to have this conversation so that people can understand. Again, we can only scratch the surface, but you really want to go deep. And if you do more research, you'll see, even from slavery, just all the Jim Crow laws, 13th Amendment, all these different things that have had a huge impact on the quality of our lives.
Rachel, you want to add to that? Or Stetson?
I would say a big one is fear, like the lack of fear.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Just like an example, if you ever get pulled over, you're probably gonna be like, oh shucks, what was I doing wrong? Like, is there something wrong with my car? Did I miss something? Did I miss a stop sign? For me is, am I going home? Am I gonna make it home today? Would be like my main thing first.
Well, Coleen, anything to add on this this conversation or this topic?
Yeah. So for me as a parent, exactly what Stetson just mentioned. And if my son, sometimes he might call and say, oh, my friends and I are going such and such a place to the cinema, or when we could go to the cinema or to Walmart or wherever. I'm like, who are you going with? Call me when you get there. There's a fear within me. Even as a Christian, it's just a reality that he might be walking with his white friend and he's the only black guy in there, and they go into the store, something happens, who gets called, held by the security guard? It's him, because he's black. So things like that worry me as a parent, that, or when he goes to the cinema, I said, which bus are you coming back on? Let me know when you get on that bus, on the train. There's just a fear that is within me when my boys are out. And as opposed to, I don't know, I can't speak for a parent who's white, but I don't think they have the same kinds of fear.
Sorry, Rachel, do you want to add?
I was just gonna say that, like, sometimes white people sometimes think that, but I've gone through a hard time too. Like, I couldn't get a job, or like Denise said, I've been unemployed, or I've been poor, so sometimes they have a hard time separating the two. But as Coleen Jackson says, is that the fact that you don't have to fear for your life, if you're gonna get pulled over, like, that's something like very real in the Black community, right? It's like whether they're gonna come home or, like that you're not gonna be judged based on the color of your skin as a white person, right? Whereas versus as a black person, you're more likely to get judged by the color of your skin versus having like what your credentials are or something.
I have to say, to add to that, a white person is not going to be pulled over in a car because they're white. So you could be driving whatever kind of car you like, in whatever neighborhood you like. That is not the reality for a black person. Marcia, I forget her last name, but she's on used to be on TV, and lives in an affluent neighborhood in Toronto. This just happened a couple of years ago. She was pulled over 3 times in the span of a few months because she lives in a nice neighborhood and drives a nice car. And every time they asked her, is this your car? What are you doing in this neighborhood? Even when she was actually at her house, the police officer made her get out of the car and didn't believe that this was her house, even though it was on her driver's license. That's the reality. And I think that's something that people just need to understand, that's just happened a few years ago, and that's right here in Toronto.
Well, I was going to ask if you feel that, because I know, at least from the news perspective, this seems to be a bigger issue south of the border. And if you would, but I think you just kind of answered that question right there, that while it may not be as prevalent, it is still very much a reality. And I like what you said, Rachel, because I know and I still struggle with it, because I don't want to think of myself as privileged, right? I don't want to think that I am getting by without merit. I went to school, but, and I tried to earn the things, but yeah, just realizing that it's not that I didn't work, it's just that the path was much smoother in a lot of ways. So thank you for pointing that out, that it doesn't mean that it's always been easy, but that is something that's very real. Anybody else want to jump in on that? I don't want to just keep moving us along. Yeah, Stetson, go ahead.
Say to that point, I think for a lot of Caucasians, even like our Christian brothers and sisters, I think the part that they struggle with is that when you think of privilege, it's like you earn this, like a rewards card or something that you can bypass lines. Unfortunately, you were just, not unfortunately, but because you were born white, you have this. Like it was just like that's yours now. So it's like you can't walk away from it. It's just like the cards you were dealt.
Thank you once again to Stetson and Rachel and Coleen and Denise for joining us and for sharing with us. And thank you for joining and watching. Let me remind all of us that our goal is to try to learn from this and see if there's anything that we should be doing differently as we learn from these conversations. Once again, we'll be back next week, so I invite you to join us for part 2 of this conversation. See you then.